I think it's pretty awesome. And all of the people sitting around hanging out. So onto the Capitol building. Now, obviously, we already learned about the Capitol building because we had an entire virtual field trip to the Capitol building. However, I figured I'd give you just some fun facts that I didn't give you during the virtual field trip. I think I already told you there were 540 rooms and 658 windows, but the dome itself is 8,909,200 pounds of iron. Just this dome here. It also has 108 windows. And it's very interesting. The whole timeline is very interesting. So for the Capitol, in 1793, the cornerstone was laid by U.S. President George Washington. So he was kind of the one to say, okay, let's build this thing. Let's do this. In 1800, so 7 years later, Congress moved from Philadelphia to this building, but only the north wing was complete. So it wasn't this huge building. It was just like the start of the building. Then in 1814, summer, it was burned down by British troops. So that was bad. So then in 1819, so it took them 5 years, and they reconstructed rooms. But it wasn't done yet by any means. They had just kind of built enough rooms that people could meet. Then in 1829, so 15 years after it got burned down, building reconstruction was completed. Then in 1851, President Millard Fillmore, he decided that there needed to be extensions. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't completing everything they needed it to complete. So they made a new hall. And in 1857, they started meeting in that new hall. In 1859, they had finished the chamber for Senate. Then in 1863, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it on this picture, but there's something called the Statue of Freedom, and that was raised into place on top of the dome. In 1870, the outside fancy stuff was finished. And then between 1890 and 1900, electric lighting was installed throughout everything. Then in 1897, so up until 1897, the Library of Congress, which we kind of learned about last time and we're going to learn about more today, they had been meeting in the Capitol building, but in 1897, they finally had their own building. And then it wasn't until 1935 that the U.S. Supreme Court moved to its own building, which we're also going to talk about today. Then between 1949 and 1951, it was kind of remodeled inside. They changed some stuff, at least for the House and Senate chambers. And then between 1958 and 1962, the East Front extension to the Capitol takes place, so they continued extending things. Then on December 2nd, 2008, so if you remember, we talked about the visitor center, and we talked about how it's in the back, and it's pretty much all underground because they didn't want to ruin how it looked. And if you remember, we talked about how that actually had like a memorial for the slaves that helped to build it, and that was kind of what we learned about with the visitor center. So that wasn't until 2008, but the center is nearly 3/4 the size of the Capitol, so it's huge. We didn't really get to explore much of it, but if you ever get to go, I encourage you to get to explore the visitor center because it is massive. It also has become the main entrance and the security checkpoint for the Capitol. So the main entrance is no longer here. It is actually the visitor center. So that is kind of a timeline of the Capitol building. I thought that it would be, just interesting for you to get to see that. So here is one of the rooms that we already talked about. But I just wanted to kind of give you some fun facts about the Capitol that I did not give you last time. So onto the White House, which I'm sure all of you have at least seen a picture of the White House. You can't actually get to see the White House super close up unless you're taking a tour. Most of the time, if you're just walking down the street, you have gates in front of you. So Here are some number facts. It has 132 rooms, 32 bathrooms, 6 levels, 412 doors, 147 windows, 28 fireplaces, 7 stairs, 3 elevators. So some interesting facts about this. So our first president, George Washington, he is the one who actually selected the site for the White House. He did that in 1791, and they laid the cornerstone in 1792. So, they kind of said, okay, we're going to build it here. And once again, they had a competition design, and someone named James Hoban, he was Irish, he was chosen, and they constructed it for 8 years. And then President John Adams and his wife Abigail moved into the unfinished house in 1800. So they moved into this house. It was not done, though, they were still constructing. Then in 1812, during the War of 1812, the British set fire to the president's house, which is what it was called at that point in 1814. Do you remember I told you that the Capitol was also burned? That was the same time. They set fire to everything. So it was set fire. So James Hoban, the same guy from before, they asked him, hey, can you rebuild the house? And he did. And it only took a couple of years. President James Monroe moved into the building in 1817, but it was still not done. They continued building. So they added the south portico and the north portico, and they continued to expand it and, change it. Some people said that they should just kind of totally start over, but nothing ever actually happened. And then in 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt, he began a major renovation. So he did a lot of things that were very different. He changed it up. For example, he moved the president's offices. They were in the second floor of the residence, so kind of where he lived, to the newly constructed temporary executive office building, which is now known as the West Wing. And then right after President Roosevelt, the President William Howard Taft, he had the Oval Office constructed. So slowly but surely, this was a work of progress. It took a really long time to make the White House we know now. Then, less than 50 years after the Roosevelt renovation, the White House was showing a lot of issues. It was showing that the structure was messed up. It was just showing a whole lot of issues. So President Harry Truman, he began a renovation in the building in which everything except the outer walls were dismantled. So it literally redid everything except these outside walls. And it was necessary because there were a lot of issues happening with it. So the reconstruction was overseen by an architect, and then the Truman family did move back into the White House in 1952. Every president since John Adams has occupied the White House, and it is so important, obviously. So a couple more fun facts. The White House actually got its name from Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, and he named it the White House. It was named all kinds of different things, such as the President's Palace, the President's House, the Executive Mansion. The White House requires 570 gallons of paint to cover its outside surface, so lots of upkeep there. The White House kitchen is able to serve dinner to as many as 140 guests. So like just regular dinner, and obviously they have all kinds of events there that they entertain a whole lot. The White House actually has usually about 6,000 visitors a day, so that's a whole lot of people. A whole lot of people. So a couple of firsts. President John Tyler, which his presidency was from 1841 to 1845. He was the first president to have his photograph taken there. President Theodore Roosevelt, he was the first president to ride in an automobile, and he obviously was really important in the White House. For fun stuff, the White House has all kinds of things, including a tennis court, a jogging track, a swimming pool, a movie theater, and a bowling lane. So the White House is incredibly impressive. But just think about how much work it's taken for it to get here. So here's the Oval Office. This is where the president works. And remember that Truman is the one, no, not Truman. Oh my goodness gracious. Taft. Taft is the one that he's the one who created this Oval Office. So pretty cool. Crazy to think about the fact that the White House that we know today was so different a long time ago. So there's the White House. We're going to move to Arlington National Cemetery. So about Arlington. So Arlington is a national, well, the National Cemetery. It is for soldiers and military, but it has a really, really interesting history. A very interesting history. So actually, we'll come back to this part. Hold on. So originally, George Washington's adopted or step grandson, he had this property, and it was 1,100 acres, and it was just this huge estate. It was this huge property, and a whole lot of stuff happened. Lots of people, they got married and they gave the land to people, and the war happened. All kinds of crazy stuff happened. And it ended up belonging to Robert E. Lee, who was a general in the Civil War. And the government actually took it from him for various reasons, and they turned it into certain things. So, for example, one thing that this not this cemetery, but that some of the land, remember, the land was 1,100 acres. So that's a big place. But one thing that the Arlington estate actually served as was Freedmen's Village, which was a place where freed slaves could go and live. Because at that time, if you were a slave, even if your owner had set you free, no one really wanted you to live near them. No one was going to just let you get a job and let you live there, especially if you were in the South. If you were in the North, you had a lot better chance because obviously the North was against slavery. But it was really hard for you to start a new life. So Freedmen's Village was a place that had schools and churches and businesses, and you were able to kind of start over there if you were a freed slave. But on May 13th, 1864, Private William Christman was buried here. He was the first person to be buried. And then in June 1864, the government decided they were going to take 200 acres and make it a cemetery for soldiers. And originally, it wasn't an honor to be buried here. It was actually typically used for soldiers whose families couldn't afford to get them brought home and buried. So that's kind of what it was originally for. Then Robert E. Lee's son kind of got mad and said, hey, wait a second, this land was ours, not yours. And the government agreed with them. The government was like, yeah, you're totally right. We didn't necessarily, this isn't our land. So they bought the land from him. And they bought it for what would have been about $4 million today. And then they decided now 639 acres of it is a cemetery. So a couple of other fun facts. The first Decoration Day, if you remember in our Memorial Day articles and things, we learned about Decoration Day. That is what Memorial Day is now. That happened here. This another fun fact, well, an interesting fact at least. This cemetery was actually segregated until 1948 when they decided it should not be segregated anymore. This is actually the Eternal Flame. This is a memorial for President John F. Kennedy. He and William Taft are the only two presidents that are buried here. None of the other presidents are buried here. So over 400,000 soldiers and their families are now buried in Arlington. And it is now seen as an honor to be buried here because, it's a very prestigious, very important cemetery in military history. And then this is the tomb of the unknown soldier. If you remember, in the Memorial Day things, we did talk a little bit about this. This is basically to remember any soldier who may not have been identified, in the war, but who died in the war. So it's basically to honor any soldier whose life was sacrificed for the war. So that is what Arlington is.